What do you think about your relationship to Earth? And if you just ask yourself right now, what is the relationship between art and the deepest ecology of the Earth? And do you have a part in that? I am Shiloh, Sophia, here on Power Creatives TV. This is season 2, and we're focusing on herstory. And I have with me in the studio Jassy Watson from Australia. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a great honour to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
We're going to have a spot of tea.
I need a spot of tea.
And so if you have a cup of tea or coffee or a smoothie, go ahead and get yourself some tea, because we are here to have alchemical cafe. And in our work, our hope is that our sharing shifts something for you where you are. So Jassy and I have known each other for quite a few years now through art. And we discovered through our own paintings and our connection how deeply rooted we are, metaphor intended, that our art is connected with our own activism.
Yes.
And this shows up in our paintings and our conversations and in our teachings. And so I wanted to invite you to speak to us today about your story, like the threads of your awakening as it's connected to your relationship with Mama Earth.
Yeah, sure. So we might go right back to the beginning then. We'll start with the first thread and take myself back to childhood, where my connection to nature was so strong, and I think that is for a lot of children who have access to being able to be in nature, which is a little bit different these days. I had the freedom to roam the Australian bush for many years as a child, and that was our playground. We would wander off all day long into some parts of the bush that I wonder now, I don't know if I'd let my own children go, you know. And so there was a constant connection with just being in nature. And that has carried through to when I was a teenager, once again living in deep Australian bush. And I would bushwalk on the weekends on my own, and just to go up to the top of the hills and walk, and I always felt this great connection. And I didn't have the language to describe what it was, one, when I was a child, two, even when I was a teenager, that sense of awesomeness and overwhelm that comes with that there's just something so much greater, and there's so much power behind it, and just naturally feeling into that energy, but I had no way of describing it. It was just this sense of being with it and feeling it, and so I tried to process that as a young woman, actually, through my art. I did a lot of work that was nature-based, or my grief over what was happening with the environment would just start to naturally appear in my artwork. But through my 20s, sort of moving away and being disconnected a little in that, having to be within the structure of working full-time in an office under artificial lighting. So there was, I have also known a complete disconnection from it as well, when I've had to be taken away. And so with the art, it started to show that disconnection. And I was not feeling that physical connection, this feeling of that would come from deep within in my expression was waning, and it was because I was not in nature all the time anymore. I was completely disconnected from it, but I was still trying to paint it. Do you know what I mean? Like I was forcing it, looking at photos and things like that, you know. And so my next big sort of awakening that has to do with my art, especially the lineage of it and the lineage of Ancient Mother, which comes up in my work as well, was going on a goddess pilgrimage to Crete in Greece back in 2012. And I was feeling so stuck as an artist that I almost put my brushes down, like away, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. And we were in this little village in a weaver's shop, and the lady there, she couldn't speak English, so she was speaking in Greek and it was being translated to us, was telling us her story about how she can trace the lineage of her traditional crafting of weaving back 3,000 years to her mother, great-grandma, all the way down, and how the patterns and things that they were weaving to us just look like this, looks like zigzags and circles and spots, were the stories of their ancestors, were the stories of how they harvested the land, like the olive groves, the stories of when they planted the seeds. And it actually, that language also went underground with other structures that came into power. The women had to have a secret language.
Right.
So they used it through their tapestry.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful. And as she was telling this story, it was like this light bulb moment. And I went, that's what I was missing in my art. What's the lineage? What's the connection? Yes. And what am I carrying on to give my children through that same process?
Right.
She was now teaching her daughter, who was teaching the granddaughter, to weave. So that's what I need to do. That's the point with the art, to tell the stories of the earth, to tell my story, the story of the lineage. And so I then went on the quest to find a way to find a way to access and hear again, so that I could paint how I felt about my connection to the earth, and not just the earth, but to the divine feminine as well.
And to your ancestry.
And to the ancestry. There's a big key.
We've been talking about a lot about whiteness.
Yes.
And about our own indigenous roots,
Yeah.
mine from the Sami and Russian and Swedish, Scandinavian.
Yeah.
And, you were telling a story of where your people are from, which was
Yeah.
so amazing. Will you tell us a little bit
I will,
about that?
actually.
Because I'm sure that factored hugely into
Yeah.
what you created.
One of, on my mum's line, so down my nana's line, her ancestor is, we call them a Kanaka. It's not really the best term to use now, but some people still use it. So he was from Mare Island, which is in the South Sea Islands, up near Namur, New Caledonia. And he was stolen by the river fishing one day when he was about 14 and brought to the Queensland coast to work in the sugarcane fields in a place called Townsville. And so we've had an interest in following his descendants because of the strong cultural ties to the South Sea Islanders, to Queensland, and their history is another one that's largely been forgotten about and gone underground. In fact, I visited one of our main museums and they had one glass window with hardly anything written on them, but yet their history is so strong. So what I discovered is that his story is the story of many, and so as we are tracing back his lineage, it's kind of like we're doing it for everybody who has that lost lineage.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I love that.
and that's coming through in my art now, as trying to connect to my ancestors who are long gone. I can't walk on that cultural land as often as I would like. So I call it through in my paintings.
Yes.
And yeah.
You're making me think of so many different things, like the day that I first saw Aboriginal art in the museum in San Francisco and saw the dots and the lines, and I was reading this story about this is the path to the sweet potato patch, something like that.
Yep.
And I just was like, that's something I've been doing in my work, is like telling this story, and I was able to feel this connection with like all of our ancestors who all were storytellers of different kinds.
That's right.
Whether that was in the fabric or on the rocks or in the Sami Nordic tradition. When I saw their paintings on drums, I was like, I've been painting on drums, like the sense of them coming through to us where we are, especially right now, so needed. And there's
Certainly.
so much tension around needing to learn from the indigenous tribes who never lost track, never went into the offices like
That's
we
right.
did,
Yeah.
of returning to that. And I feel like I see that return and forward future thinking both in your paintings.
I think you've made a really good point there. Yeah, definitely. There's this sense of return, and I say about all my work, it's a deep remembering, a restoring, and a restoration at the same time, as well as looking forward. Yeah.
And that's such an amazing place to be in,
Yeah.
is in that space between the awareness of our ancestry
Yeah.
and with that thought to the future. And I mean, every indigenous culture I've ever studied has an awareness of that.
Yes.
And that also occurs so naturally in nature. For example, when the trout is in its perfect spot, when it's just hovering there,
Yeah.
that's because water is going one way and another water is going this way. And the place where there's this peace and optimal health is when these
Right.
two flows are happening at the same time. And I think about that a lot. Like, how can I be the spirit of the trout in this moment where I'm held inside of water moving one way and water moving another way, and in that there's this motion, but this stillness,
The stillness
still
is the
radiance
perfect word.
inside of it.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. The in-between spaces.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
The women between
Yeah.
worlds. We talk about
Yeah.
that a lot in our work. We've been
We
so
do.
blessed to have Jassy come. She said she was going to come and teach on tribe to our community of Cosmic Cowgirls, and we had that this weekend. And then starting tonight, we are gathering around legend.
Yeah.
And so it's so wonderful to join up with women from other cultures and countries and beliefs and ancestries to explore the connectivity and
That's
to
right.
discover our own way of working with how are we tending the earth at this time.
That's right.
And so I'd love for you to, I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, I wanted you to tell us about the bush, because we hear about it a lot, but we don't know how, what is that like? 'Cause, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one. And then the other one is how activism is played out in your role as an artist.
Sure. So, the great Australian bush.
Yes.
The first word that comes to mind is it's relentless. It's harsh and so beautiful. And being such a big country, we have pockets of all different kinds of bush, from the rainforest to the very dry bush. And it's ancient land. And when you stand in our Australian bush, much like you would here standing in the redwoods,
Yes.
you feel the spirit of the ancestors so strong, and the pulse and the spirit of the land is so strong that even the most disconnected person could not feel it, just because of its strength, its age, and its beauty at the same time. And so living in the bush, I consider through periods in my life some of the greatest experiences that I've had. And in fact, where we lived at a place called Tambourine, if anyone from Australia, they will know that place, a place of lots of Indigenous history surrounding the area. And we had no street lights, so we also lived in the dark, and for some time we lived without services, so we didn't have water or electricity and all that kind of stuff. And so we got the real bush experience. The bush is so loud at times that it's deafening.
Yeah.
And I've written about it quite a bit, actually. The cicadas in summer are so loud. People would say on the telephone, "What is that noise in the background?" And you'd go into town and you were actually deaf from the noise of the cicadas. So, and of course it's dangerous.
Right.
Our country, like everyone knows around the world, your country's so dangerous. And it is. And it's funny looking back though, because all of those, I would just pack up and go bushwalking, and I used to have to do these climbs through scrub to reach the next
Right.
rock surface to then get to the top. There was so much danger around me, but I was not thinking about that. I think as you get older, you might get a little bit more worried.
Right.
The snakes. I mean, we had
Right.
some of the most dangerous snakes ever living in very close vicinity to us.
And didn't you say you could also smell when the snake
Yes,
is
I
coming
have
down?
learnt now. Someone a few years ago told me, snakes have a smell of like rotting compost. You can smell them when they're around. And I could. We had a snake hanging around our house for some time, and I could see what this person, alerted me to it.
I just keep feeling like that needs to go in your legend painting. She could smell the snake
Snakes.
emergence. Like there's something so amazing about that. That makes me think of our property up in Anderson Valley, which you've
Yep.
been to.
Yep.
Terra Sophia, growing up there at times, no toilet, no electricity.
Yep.
And just the sheer pleasure of being young and running through our version of the bush
Yeah.
and the scrub, and not caring if your legs are scratched,
Yeah.
not caring if there's spiders in your hair, like just that
Yeah.
whole getting with nature and how
Covered in prickles and
just
yeah.
making me think of this one time that I was attacked by a nest of bees. I
Wow.
can't remember, yellow jackets or something, and I always remember that moment. My cousin Bridget and I were walking down these steps to the river, and we stepped on a steps. It was once in the ground, and they swarmed us, and we became completely attacked.
Wow.
And we were put in the car, and we drove over to Alice Walker's property, who's
Yep.
our neighbor, and she has a pond. And so we got in the pond, and we were coated with mud and then laid out to bake. I always remember this. I can smell every part of that day, you know, and I just remember laying there and baking and just being like, wow, this is an amazing experience, and everything that we actually need to heal is on this earth.
Yep.
And we didn't end up having one welt. Like,
No.
everything is here on this
It's
earth.
available to us, you know.
And
Yeah.
so how does that work out? You know, we are both into, I would say, deep ecology, the whatever the real medicine of the earth
Yeah.
is that we're in relationship with. And yet our way of activism shows up through our art. And I would say, you know, I used to say, oh, you know, we must consider painting as equal work as planting carrots.
Yes.
And that the carrot planters can't say, oh, that's luxurious, and the painting people can't say, oh, you should come paint. You know,
Yep.
we can't elevate levels of activism.
No, definitely not.
So for you,
Yeah, I use, as an artist, I feel like I've got a social responsibility to use my creative voice as my voice of activism.
Yeah.
And so I have the inner activist. As I was saying to you earlier, I would love to be on the Greenpeace boats and fighting for whaling, or down in Tasmania in the old growth forest. I remember seeing this young girl lived at the top of this tree for so many months with nothing to save this tree from being cut down, and they didn't cut it down. It was the oldest tree, and that girl lives inside of me, but I can't do those things. You know, I have a young family, and you know, all these other reasons. So how do I take that and process that? Well, it's through my art that I can have that activist voice and still try and make some difference. I cannot stand back and not have a voice over what's happening about the earth. I cannot stay quiet about that stuff. So it takes everybody in the capacity, in the way that you know how, to have a voice. And it doesn't necessarily mean that my art is about the atrocities and what's happening to the earth and all of that. I'm using it primarily as a tool to remind people of the sacred connection that we have with the earth.
Yeah.
So when you look at my images, I would hope not only are they healing for me to do, in that it's a place for me to process the grief I have over the earth and create some beauty, so I can bring the beauty forth, even though I'm feeling so deeply torn apart about it. And there's not so much beauty, you know, there's so much destruction still. It makes me so sad, so sad. I look at my children and I think, what kind of earth are you inheriting? And I don't know where to go with that sometimes. That's really overwhelming.
and so when you have, I feel the same way. Like if I listen to trees or water in certain environments, I feel like I'm hearing them at some
Yeah.
level,
Yeah.
however weird that might sound.
Yeah.
And I'll just instantly like well up in tears because
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, and how could we be so ignorant at this time to not tend our water and our earth? Like it's like madness to me, and it would overtake me. And so how do you, when you're like with Standing Rock or whatever that equivalent is in
Yep.
your territory, I know is happening too.
Fracking is the big thing at home.
How do you, when you feel that swell, like it's just going to eat you,
Yeah.
do you go to your painting? Tell us a little bit about your process.
I do. I go to the canvas, and I firstly remind myself of the beauty of the earth and what's left. So yes, there's all this destruction going on, but I only need to look around where I live, and I go, this is so amazing. This is so beautiful. I have to have a voice to protect you. And to do that, I have to, I don't know if rising above is the right terminology, but I have to move through that grief so that my voice is not one of fear And it's not one of constantly reminding people of the destruction and of all the horrible things happening. I have to remind myself too that there's so much good stuff happening. There are so many people doing really amazing stuff around the world. The World Wildlife Fund, Greenpeace, ALA, the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, who I was part of last year in organising a national art exhibition from artists all over Australia who were using their creativity as a voice for the earth. And so there were pockets of people doing ecological art. So there is so much good happening, and I have to remind myself of that. And so when I go to the painting process, I want to remind people of that beauty as well. And I want to remind people how we can talk about being connected to the earth, we can talk about it until the cows come home. But it's more than that. It's about being in deep relationship with the earth. And that's the difference. You can go out and stand on the earth and go, oh, I'm connected now. But it's the relationship and the sacred nature of that relationship that we need to be reminded of.
And that it's, I love the teachings from the quantum world about how everything is responding to us.
Yes.
You know, it's all vibrating at a certain frequency that allows it to be tree and us to be human and water to be water. And that it is responding to our presence.
That's right.
So when we're in nature and enjoying and appreciating or bringing that into our work, it is, I feel like it knows.
It does.
Nature knows.
It's reciprocal. I think when I go out and stand under that tree and receive its energy, it's also receiving mine.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's receiving my love for it or something, you know.
It's real.
I think that's a cycle.
Yeah.
And this, we for thousands of years, it's been sort of taught to us in philosophies that we are separate. And that gets talked about a lot. And of course, I think we are both separate and whole, but we live our lives separately from nature. And in this modern world, I think it's so important to remind ourselves, because we're in artificial lighting all day, people working in cities, and we can't help the disconnection. So to remind people that, hey, this is out there, we need to protect it. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the trees. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the plants. That's what supports life. Everything.
And so one of the ways I know that you practice this is through your art studios in Australia. And will you tell us a little bit about those and your teachings?
Sure. So I have two studios back at home, one near Bundaberg, Queensland, which is run as a little school. And my tagline there is Earth Connection, Creative Expression, because I believe that to be connected deeply to your creative cycle, because it's connected to all the other cycles, you need to also be connected to the earth cycles, the seasonal cycles, the moon cycles, because they're all connected. And so through the classes that I teach, there's always this aspect, and regardless of what the teaching is, you know, I teach classes on Gaia, it might be just looking at aspects of ourselves. There's always a process of actually having to connect to the earth before the creative process can start. And so I teach women and girls at home. I do teachings on the medicine wheel, and also down in Melbourne, Victoria, in Fitzroy, I have a small studio down there. And so I run classes in both places, and it's all about encouraging sustainable, creative community as well at home. And it starts for me at home. And I love having the little girls come especially, and we talk about the seasons, we talk about the moon, we talk about their own inner cycle and their dream cycle and how that connects to their creative cycle. And sometimes it's like the little pieces of the puzzle come together and it's like, okay. And so, yeah.
I love that. And our connection, one of them anyway, came through you choosing to come into Color of Women School. And so how do you feel like you were already an artist and already deeply activist and connected to ecology and earth and the cycles and seasons? What called you to intentional creativity, and how has it contributed?
So going back to that moment I had in Greece when I I immediately went back to my room and got the sketch pad and pencils that I brought with me in the hope that maybe I might do some drawing. And I started drawing. And then I just had all of these visions and images go before me, but I wasn't quite sure how do I get that out again? I was, had that little period of stuckedness. And so when I got home, I went searching. I can't remember. I Google searching, art from within, intuitive art, like things like that, because I was like, I need to go in another direction. And I came across Colour of Woman School. And like every woman that comes through the training says, it was like the biggest aha moment. There it is. That's what I need to do. And what I hadn't been taught in art school and all the training that I'd done was to look within. And that's what you were teaching. And so after the training, I wasn't sure if I expected to go on teaching it. I was doing it for my own self as an artist and for my own art process. And then all of a sudden I found myself teaching it. Like, this is awesome. And I haven't stopped. So I've been teaching intentional creativity classes using the Colour of Woman method for 4 years. And I have regular classes happening all the time at the studios. And it's so amazing because for me, that's the access point for people for other women to awaken to their creative self. And then to combine that with an awakening of their self and their relationship to the earth. I was able to then join those two together. So through the creative process, I can help people also connect to the earth. And that's such an amazing link to have that. So I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful that it spoke to you and that you consider it worthy to continue to teach it. It's so amazing. And Jassy taught this year as a part of our Colour of Women School, so I love that when someone has practiced it enough that it's like, now come teach with us. Well, we wanted to include you in a red thread, and then we're going to do a creative process. And for those of you who have paint at home, you can use paint. And for those of you who have just pens and paper, you can use that.
And I'll just show you a quick process on a tree woman. And I'm going to try and arrange for it to be sent as a link. So if you're interested in actually sort of doing it a little bit better or creating a little bigger piece over it, you can have that free tutorial. Will
you lead us in the virtual red thread? All of you just imagine that this is happening in real space-time, because it is.
It is, in quantum time. So the red thread, if you're not aware, is sort of core to your practice. And we're taught the red thread, how to hold a red thread circle as part of the training of Colour of Woman. And it is the most amazing process to go through to connect people, because we talk about the thread and we know that the thread exists, but to hold it and to pass it to one another and to feel that connection is really quite profound. And so, as we know, it's been used in lots of cultures and traditions worldwide. And recently I found the red thread in Bali, which was a great revelation. And even though it's always been there, you know. And so today I would like to extend this red thread to you, Shiloh, and to all of our listeners and watchers out there as a symbolic of that thread of connection to not only us, but to the earth and to the great Mama Earth, extending now right back until, the beginning of time.
The great umbilical cord.
Yes.
So imagine that it's actually cosmically traveling and that you can receive it in your hands. And just allow yourself to feel the connection as authentic to you from us. And if there's something that you've been longing for regarding your connection with Earth, to just be in a little inquiry about that with yourself.
And what does it mean to be in relationship with the Earth? I think that's a really good question to ask.
And perhaps it will stir you after our time today to just go and put your hands on some soil. Or if you're a painter, to get a leaf or a flower petal and put it in your water jar. And just allow yourself to receive being connected, to step into the power of already being connected. In the teachings of the red thread, each of us has our piece, and our piece is largely based in creativity.
Yes, it is.
So I'm going to cut my piece and just make a little personal declaration. It occurred to me this morning, and now I know why it's connected, that we have been on this property for about a year. It's just about an acre.
Yep.
There's been a lot of chaos and a lot of brush removal and garbage removal and residual stuff from people who lived here for 30 years. Dump load after dump load and recycle after recycle and burn after, like, just been a lot of work for my beautiful husband. And this morning I was like, you know, I need to walk the parameter like every day that I can.
Yep.
Jonathan calls it riding the fences,
Yeah.
which I love. I'm like, I really want to, now it's been raining nonstop, so it's boggy out there, but now it's sunny today. And I was like, I just want to walk, and I want to track the progress of the buds. I just want to see, like, I woke up this morning, I was like, there's roses blooming somewhere that I haven't looked at for a week.
Yep.
You know, this sense of this little bit of territory. And maybe if you don't have a yard or a park or a forest nearby, but just like to look at the growing, like watching the growing seasons is so huge. I remember the first time I planted my first row of tulips in my early 20s, and how I would go and have tea with them every day, and the pure delight of the change. And I remember the day that I thought they were going to open, and I scheduled the whole day, and I just sat and I waited, you know, and just that kind of tending of the evolution and what a teaching that is. So anyway, that's what I woke up this morning thinking. I need to walk the land.
And I'll just, on top of that, I think that's a really good point you made, because I often get asked, well, how can I get more connected to the land? And sometimes at home on Indigenous land, we're made to feel like it's not our land. And so this sense of, it's about getting to know it. So to be in relationship with it, you've got to get to know it. And that's what you're talking about. By walking the perimeter, and it's all about observation and paying close attention. What birds are migrating? But, you know, what's that flock of geese? What are they called? Not just, oh, there's a flock of geese. Oh, look at them, aren't they beautiful? What are they? What time of year do they come over? And I know at home now, whenever the Moreas flower, it's going to rain without fail. And now my daughter knows that. She knows, Mum, the Moreas are flowering. It's going to rain soon. And so it's all about getting to know. And it's important just to get to know, start with your microclimate and your backyard, and then move it out. And even drawing a little map of the area that you live in, and where's the local river? What are the native trees that grow along that river? And what's the fish species, the main fish species? Just little information like that.
I love that.
Is really important. And then you can go, oh wow, we've got a grove of these trees here, and this happens, and
Yeah. And I think that sense mentioning that is so important about just in the United States. You know, I personally believe that we're in occupied territory. Sent an email about that and had a lot of unsubscribes. But I really, that's my personal view. And so there's this deep respect and awareness. So when we first came here, I researched what it was before and who the people were, the coastal Miwoks. And this is where the bay, San Pablo Bay, used to come up all the way.
It's incredible
here.
to think
and so we are in a lot of water, and it's like I can't make everything right.
No.
But my awareness that I'm cultivating this space, and to ask myself, how will I tend it, and then what will I do to make an offering back to share what there is as I'm stewarding. And that's how Sue used to always talk about it. She would say, we're stewarding. We own nothing.
That's exactly right.
The privilege of stewarding. So
it's a good way of looking at it.
Wherever you are living, and this is one of the things I said in the email, of like, go look up the indigenous people of the place you're living, whether you're in an apartment building in New York or the UK, like go look at the ancient maps
Yes.
and see who was there. And even if that isn't a part of your own spiritual tradition, just to be able to know what was there before. And looking at antique maps, I've looked at antique maps of this exact geography.
That's incredible.
And so, and to look at the water
Yeah.
pathways.
That's
and
right.
It's
about honour and respect.
it is.
That's what it comes down to.
And I think pleasure.
Yes.
Ultimately too. Like
Yes.
when I feel more connected to being here, then instead of inactivity due to the shame of our
Yeah.
culture's oppression, I actually move into action.
That's right.
So I will cut my piece. That's
Thank
my.
you.
And in the teaching of the red thread, if you only tended your piece, if Jassy just did her piece and I just did my piece, we'd have a different world. And that's exactly what we're doing here and inviting you to, is just to tend what is yours to tend. But you have to know what that is. There's a responsibility to know what the Hawaiian call your kuleana,
Yeah.
your sacred responsibility.
We call our Indigenous call the kanini. So that's a similar kind of meaning.
One of the hopes that I take about the earth and my study of earth and quantum physics, the cosmos and earth over the past few years has to do with understanding the way that it regenerates itself.
Yeah, yeah.
In the sense that everything has a capacity to heal itself.
Yes.
Water, when returned to its natural pattern, actually restores itself.
Yeah.
How nature heals itself, and that we have that capacity. That's where my hope lies.
And I think exactly where my hope lies too. Yeah. Regeneration.
Well, we
Restorative.
feel honored that you're going to show
Thank you.
us today a demonstration, and you can follow along or watch and do it later. So you go ahead and take over.
Cool. What I actually like to do before this process is because it is about connecting to nature or connecting to the earth using the creative process as well. So not just painting, doing artwork about nature or about its beauty, but really visualizing your connection to the earth. And so for a long time in my artwork, I've had tree women appear, and I'm not the only artist with the tree women appear. I've seen lots of them around, and I often have people say, "Oh, how do you do that?" And I don't often show people because I think it should come from within. But I'm going to do a quick demonstration today of the tree woman because I think it's a really good symbol to show that relationship, that deep relationship and connection, but also to break down that illusion of separateness. Yeah, so which is so important. But what I like to do first is actually imagine myself, and it's a really good exercise before you start to do any creative process, is just to stretch out and move, just so that your energy can move around. Is to actually stretch my arms up so high into the sky, like I am the tree, and feel like that I do have these branches growing, stretching all out into the atmosphere, soaking up the sunlight, and it's full of life and buds and flowers, and that my body is standing strong and supported on the earth, connected to my feet, and I imagine that I have these roots descending right down deep into the center of the earth. So I'm feeling completely strong, supported, connected, right from the center of the earth all the way up. And that's how the energy of the tree, when I think about the energy of the tree, that's what I feel like. Because there's all this energy up there. It doesn't stop at the top of its canopy.
Right.
It keeps going. And it goes all the way down. And I feel nourished and nurtured when I can feel the energy of the tree in my body. And we were just saying earlier that the connection between humans and trees is so similar because they're made up of chlorophyll, we have hemoglobin, and their makeup is so similar. It's only the centre that's different. So it's so amazing to think that you look at us and look at trees, but there's so many similarities.
And that we, like right now, we have 17 redwood trees around us.
Yep.
And even though we're on a really busy road, but it's like we are in the electromagnetic field of the trees at all times.
And all the research coming out now about trees singing, trees having their own language, trees if one's cut down in the forest, all the others send out this energy to it
Yep.
to help it heal or to protect it. How I just get goosebumps thinking about that. I mean, they have their own families in their groves, and I think it's so important to not only just to connect with them, but really do all we can to plant more trees, because we need oxygen to live. So at my place, we're planting a lung, so it's very thick. I consider having a green lung around our property.
Love that.
Yeah. So this process is going to be quick, and as I said, you'll get a little tutorial perhaps later on. Hopefully we can organise that so you can spend some more time with the process. So you can use paints or pens, pencils, whatever you like. You can rewatch this later and go and get some materials. I've chosen 3 colours, and the way I just choose some colours and thinking about, well, how do I feel about trees? And I just think of the earth, the soil, and the sky. So I'm just going to put a wash on, so a very wet brush, and I'm just going to cover it with a good wash. Am I in a right position okay? And if you've got any water squirters or anything, we're not trying to be perfectionists or anything here. We are just putting a little bit of a background down. Maybe I should have used a bigger brush. And then I'm going to put some green in the middle. Looks just like planet Earth, those colours together. They're so beautiful. And then a little bit down here. Just symbolically representing the soil. Okay, I'm just getting a really wet background. Oh, not too wet, just letting some drips go.
The freedom of it. And she's using watercolor paper, 140-pound watercolor paper, in case you don't have some and you want to.
And you can, if you've got a good mixed media journal, you can put a bit of gesso down and do it on there. On anything you want. You can paint this kind of thing on a canvas too, so you can spend more time with it. And so now that I've got the wet canvas, it's a very simple process to draw a woman tree. I'm going to do it with I'm actually just going to do it straight on with the brush. Yeah. So I've got a little bit of black and a little fine brush. And I start from the top. And so when I'm doing it, I'm imagining how I felt when I was stretched out and how the tree stretches out. And then I just bring that line right down to the bottom like that.
You're slightly twirling your brush.
Slightly twirling the brush, so you get like a line, a varied line, and down like that. And you can already see that these here are going to sort of be my arms already. And then just come in and start. You don't need to know how to draw a woman's body to do this at all. It's all just about feeling and seeing. It's already in the drips that come through. I just start to follow some of those lines. There. Stretching her arms up. I tend to maybe put a little bit of... I always put long hair on these ladies. And some breasts. Yeah. And then I just start to put in more detail of the roots there. The paper's a little bit wet, so the water's running, but that's okay. You can do this in a Sharpie or a watercolour crayon as well. And then we just put a little face in. It doesn't need to be detailed at all. And then I just start adding the branches. And some of us already have affinity with certain trees. You know, do you like have a personal tree that calls you? You know, some people say, oh, it's the oak tree or the pine tree or something like that. I have this thing for apple trees, where if I thought of myself, what kind of tree would I be? It would be an apple tree. Yeah, and I don't know what that's about. It's just the
That
feeling I
question.
get.
Maybe
Yeah.
ask yourself that question.
What kind of tree would you be? And, you know, the tree of life has appeared in, you know, every culture, every myth. And trees have assigned qualities, you know. And I think they're really, and for me, when I think of the apple tree, for myself, it's, you know, it's all about abundance and being connected to the seasons. And I start asking myself, well, you know, what is the fruit of my abundance?
And right now, in this part of the world, we're going into Beltane.
Yeah.
And in your part of the world,
Samhain, you know, we put it Samhain, some people pronounce it. So I love the paradox of that. Isn't
I
that
do
fabulous?
too. You know, before my relationship with you, I
Yeah.
don't know that I paid enough attention to it.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like a revelation, like you know, but you don't know. And I would be posting about,
Yeah.
you know, whatever it was, what Beltane or winter solstice, and you're like,
Yep.
it's summer solstice, and I'm just like, wow, that's so cool. And so somehow that awareness of
Yeah.
that shifted my global perception.
That's so amazing. And it's really, I think it's really good to remember and go, okay, well, that's happening for us here, but down south, it's the polar opposite, and you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
It's all happening at once. It still blows my mind to think about it. And so, I'm, you know, part of the work I'm doing as well, using art as creative voice and to help people connect to the earth. It's all based around that, those cycles of the seasons, using the medicine wheel as the connection, so you can start to recognise the changes in your own body and in the own area that you live in.
Yeah, so important. Like we're on the new moon, and when we start to have an awareness of the moon cycles,
Yes.
even just the primary ones, new and full, we teach on the moon cycles.
That's right, and Red Madonna.
It's sort of in the background, but it's like what's the supporting structure behind, and you start to be able to
Yep.
connect more. And I think I've always felt like it was such a weird conspiracy that we went to the 12-month cycle
Yeah.
off
Yep.
the 13 moon cycle. And so now if you're really going to live by the moon cycle, you have to be really, you know, you've got to have your calendar and stuff like that. But it's a whole different cycle to not be on the 13. And I think that's part of
Totally
what
is.
disconnected women from the understanding of their menstrual cycles.
And that's right. And talking about our disconnection from the, you know, from the earth, is when we look at the bigger picture, you know, there's this disconnect from woman, ancient mother, all of that. So the destruction of the earth is, you know, we look at it in the context of destruction of
Absolutely.
the feminine.
It is.
Yeah.
And even in a family like mine, where there was a lot of artists and eccentrics, and feminists and people who honored the earth,
Yeah.
nobody really educated me on my cycle, my moon cycle,
Yep.
or even when I was ovulating,
Yeah.
in relationship to the moon. And so those of you who are listening who do have girls at home who are about to menstruate or going to, helping them get a moon calendar,
Yeah.
so that they can have an understanding of what's their own energies and physical body energies. Just to know when you're ovulating is huge.
It's so important. And then you start to see the correlation of that with your creative cycle. So if you're an artist or a creative person of any kind, to track your creative cycle on that was such a revelation to me, because when people say to me now, I'm feeling stuck, I haven't got any ideas. And it's like, well, where are you in your cycle? It's like, well, you don't need to be creative right now.
Right.
You know, like people forcing yourself through, like, well, I should be, I'm an artist. Shouldn't I be creating every day? And it's like, well, no, there's actually these whole periods where you can just let it rest and where things have to percolate. So
Yeah.
then you can bring them out. And
Love that.
so there's no place to be stuck when you can get into that rhythm, or round and
Right.
round. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So this is my quick woman tree. And you see how quickly that I painted her up, and everyone always says to me, yeah, but that's okay. You can do it really quickly. But this for me, she starts to appear, and you can add colour and put the fruit on and whatever kind of tree you are. But if you do artwork where trees appear too, you'll just sometimes start to see that woman's body start to appear, and you just start to mark her in, and it's a really good way. It just reminds me when I'm feeling disconnected, I go and draw these little ladies through my journal, whatever. It just reminds me that, okay, I'm not separate. I need to connect back. And so I think this is a really great tool. Yeah.
It is. Thank you for doing that.
That's okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
So good.
Thank you. Oh.
There she is, watching over us.
Yeah.
We've both been painting trees for a really long time and painting similar tree women. That it's something that belongs to all beings.
It does, yeah. And even when I look out in nature at a grove of trees, and I know lots of other people do the same, I see them as women. I see the trees as women dancing. And it used to stop me actually on a drive home through the country I used to take when I was younger. There was these particular trees in a grove of a lake, and they look dead but they're not. And so they're in the water, and they're just grey, and they stand up so tall, and they have all these branches going off. And I was driving past one day, and they called me, like all of the trees, and I stopped the car and I had to get out, and who was calling my name? And I looked at them again, and they were women as the trees. And that was like another sort of moment where I went, okay, I'm not imagining this.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so just seeing the earth body as my body, I think that was what I was being sent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some things you can do to start connecting more, we've mentioned a few, but to go out in nature and use found objects, sticks and leaves and stones to make an altar out in nature as an offering.
Yeah.
That is huge. Also, if you have, one of my favorite things to do when I was little was to get my grandma had this giant silver mixing bowl. I don't know if it was that big, but to me it was that big at the time. And I would go and I would pick, and I would be with the fairies, and I would pick just the tops of little leaves and flowers and grasses, and I would put them all on the top of the water, float them on the water, and then I would take a big wooden spoon and I would stir the water as fast as I could, so it would get going like this, and then I would stare into it as if I was having a story with the fairies, and it was my flower bowl soup. And it was just a delightful thing. So it's a wonderful way, too, to teach children.
Definitely.
To ask, too, before you take things. I think it's really important. I remember a moment with one of my students where we went to the beach, and how you pick up a stone and take it with you. Our whole tribe.
We have stories about
some
that.
Commonalities. We who carry rocks. And I remember the student was like, that she was, 9 or something, and she was like, I was like, okay, choose the one rock that speaks to you, and she picked up the rock, and then she picked up another rock, and then she picked up another rock, and I was like, no, just one rock. She's like, well, why? I'm like, well, anyway, we had this whole episodic meltdown around, but there's so many rocks,
Yep.
And I remember just being like, wow, I got to do that better next time, like really be clear about this, and you ask the rock, and you look for the rock that is your stone.
Yes.
And like we have a stone here that's, from ancestral lands, from our family. And it's like with each thing, there's a sense of respect, a sense of asking, a sense of listening to.
That's right. Because we do have this ownership over things, don't we? Just this natural thing that we can take whatever it is from nature, and the great resource companies are the perfect example of that on a very big scale, thinking that they can just take whatever from the earth.
Yeah.
And again, there's no reciprocity around that.
It's an extraction.
That's right.
That's destabilizing.
Yes.
How this is going.
That's
and
right.
I do think sometimes I feel despair, but I do feel like there's hope.
Yeah.
And creativity for me is one of the ways that I work with nurturing that.
Definitely. I do. I mean, it would be so easy to fall into a complete despair and stay in the fear of what's happening. Standing Rock, again, is another perfect example. At home we have, even the land I'm on, all around us, we're mapped for fracking, we're mapped for mining, and some of this land is protected Indigenous land, but yet the government can come and overrule that. And everybody knows about the state of the Great Barrier Reef. We're hearing about that all around the world as well. And so there is so much that we could go into such despair about. But personally, I need to turn that despair into something else, which creates the motivation to take action.
Right.
And to use art as a voice for the earth, to me, is so important. And so coming up this year again, I held Voices for the Earth exhibition for Queensland regional artists who, back at home in Australia, who are using, because there's a lot of us out there, I started to discover, who are using art as a way to get an ecological message across. So I'm inviting people again to submit works for an exhibition that'll be held in August called Voices for the Earth. So I like to, it's not about me and it's not about my work, it's about showcasing artists who've got something to say, and I usually get some Queensland Indigenous artists put their work in, telling their traditional stories about their connection to the land and to Mother Earth, which is very, very important for me to have their work acknowledged. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we hope that this has been a illuminating and hopefully inspiring journey for you to look at your relationship to Earth and to choose to be in an active relationship.
Yes.
It is, in my worldview, we are creations living inside of a creation created by a creator, and our lives are creation, which is how we live our lives is our choice. And to anyone who's doing that independent of tending the earth is not responsible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because everyone I know cares.
That's
so
right.
I'm just
Me
like,
too.
Who are these
Mostly.
people? And why are there so many of them?
Yeah.
And what are they, they have children.
Yeah.
How can they not be thinking about the children that they've given birth to and their children's children? I'm just so stunned by the whole thing.
Me too.
And so each of us is doing our part, our piece of the red thread. So it's just an invitation for you.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an action you want to take
I think
to discover more about how your particular thread is connected to the earth and the voice of the earth.
Yeah. Perfect query.
And tell us how we can find out more about you, and if they wanted to see your paintings, how we can do that.
Sure. You can, best place is to visit my website, earthcirclestudios.com, and more of my contemporary work is jassy.com.au, and you can see all of my classes there, and everything that I paint is usually listed. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yep. And upcoming exhibitions as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for journeying all this way to
You
be
are
with
so,
us.
it's been an
pleasure.
honour. Thank you to be with you all.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. We hope you'll join
Thank
us
you.
for the next episode of Power Creatives TV, where I'm exploring relationships with women who are mostly my friends and colleagues, to learn their threads of awakening in the stories that created them as who they are today, and their offerings for you about how you can be more connected to your creative soul.
Thank you.